as way of introduction, a little bit of background about myself. I have worked in human resources in a number of leadership positions for the past 38 years. Um, my work experience has all been with in the private sector. I've worked for a number of different types of businesses, everything from family-owned business to large Fortune 500 corporations, and a few things kind of in between. The last two employers that I had, my most recent employer was Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, and I retired, air quotes, from them a year ago last month. And prior to that, I worked for Kellogg Company. So those are two organizations that I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And in my scope of human resources work, I have been on the receiving end of job offers, and have certainly uh, been the person negotiating for my own self. And I've been on the other end where I am working with candidates who want to negotiate their starting salary, as well as people as they're on their career journey, be it a promotion or a transfer or a lateral move, or just because, hey, boss, I think I'm worth more money than you're paying me, and I think we need to talk. All of those kind of examples and scenarios I've been a part of and have participated in. So what we'll first talk about is the first question that was asked is it appropriate to negotiate your salary? And my answer is heck yes. Um, you know, uh, Almost any time is a good time to negotiate your salary, but I emphasize almost because there's obviously some times when it's not, and I'll try to mention some of those. But the two items that I have on here that I put asterisks next to, the initial pre-hire and then the before accepting a new position. The before accepting a new position, that means somebody from a new organization has made you an offer and you're seriously considering it, but you're kind of thinking through it and don't know if you quite want to leave your current organization and that sort of a thing. In my opinion, those two stages with an employer are probably the time where you have the most leverage and probably the most ability to negotiate your salary. And unfortunately, it's when you enter the door and when you exit the door, and it can be a little bit more problematic in between. But certainly, the initial pre-hire, you're a candidate, you've got an organization that's interested in you, and they're talking to you about you joining the organization from a promotion. Uh, in that, generally with a promotion, you have applied and you have interviewed for a position along with other internal people to the organization, and oftentimes with internal and external people. A lateral move, um, there's a lot of times in a person's career where they are asked to take a different job, and that job may have a different title. It may be in the same salary range. It could be taken on more responsibility. Just those type of changes also can warrant times to discuss salary with your manager. Transfer, relocation are certainly great opportunities to do that, and particularly in the private business world, you see a lot of times where a person, let's say as an example, they're the HR manager at a location, and they're at the location in Lawrence, Kansas, and the company wants them to essentially do the same position, really the same amount of responsibility, but they want them to do it in Dallas, Texas. That's a transfer, and that's a relocation. And even though on paper, your salary range is the same, it's always good to talk about to negotiate your salary when you're going to make a relocation or a transfer. Additional responsibility. This one, I think you have to be a little careful with, because what I have found is just because you are asked to take on additional responsibility in and of itself doesn't always necessitate you wanting to negotiate or ask for more money. For one thing, that additional responsibility may be as a result of the team that you're on. Maybe they've had to downsize, they're consolidating responsibility. I know at the university, you all have experienced a lot of that. And basically you just kind of have to, put on your big boy pants and big girl pants and take on some of that extra work. Some of it is just, you're really good at what you do, Mark. And, we're just going to keep on giving you more and more and more. But what I would say about that is, think in terms of when you take on additional responsibility, how does that add value to you and your work? How much does that make? How much more valuable are you as a result of taking on that additional responsibility, either for the next job down the line or future promotion or what have you? So it doesn't necessarily always have to come with extra money. And what I would also say is that if you take on responsibility and you feel as a result of that, you're having to do so much more work and so much more hours, I wouldn't ask to negotiate right off the bat. I would give it some time to kind of sit in, and maybe 6 months as just to kind of throw out a time frame before you would maybe want to go back to your manager, your director, and talk about salary. Off-cycle review or evaluation. Most organizations have a planned annual or biannual period of time in which you receive feedback on your progress, and oftentimes it comes with a discussion about salary, money. And so sometimes you can ask for an off-cycle review. It's been 6 months, and I feel like a lot of things have changed within the department. I've taken on a lot of additional responsibility. I knocked it out of the park for you on the XYZ project and got a lot of feedback from you on that. And I'd like to sit down and talk with you if maybe it might make sense to evaluate my compensation. Would you allow me to do that to, kind of make my case with you? And then obviously before accepting a new position, and that again would have to do with, I'm working for the Kellogg company, and Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company is recruiting me to a position. Then when I talk with my current employer about that, they may want to talk about, well, where are you at on salary? What are they offering you? What could we do to make this more enticing for you to stay? Next. So the question is salary negotiations expected? Yes, no. It's both. It's yes and no. I think you have to consider the organization. In some organizations, it is part of the culture to where you could negotiate salaries, and maybe more private organizations, nonprofit. Here's what we have to pay, and there's not really much more that we can do for you. So it's kind of a yes, no. It depends on the position, the organization, the job, etc. Your experience level, obviously for some of the students that you're coaching and they are just right out of school, they have their undergraduate degree, they may have a minimum amount of experience. Their ability to negotiate that starting salary will obviously be a bit more limited than someone who's been out in the working world and say they've had 3, 4, 5 years experience in that field. It doesn't mean that it can't be done, but it's a little bit more limited for them. And then obviously market conditions. Is there a surplus of people that are looking in this field? Is there a scarcity and people are hard to find? Are you in an area where there's a lot of downsizing and layoff type things? So there's a lot of things to consider in terms of market conditions that would say if it's appropriate for you to negotiate your salary. It's really important, I think, for anyone to be able to make a case and have a good idea as to what they're worth. Nobody else is really going to do that for you. You as the job hunter, you as the employee, the professional, really have to do that yourself. And consider your degree and the school that you graduated from, your work experience in the industry or field. Consider if you did an internship or were part of a co-op program, maybe with a competitor. That might certainly kind of help your standing and your leverage in negotiating. The location, the job market and salaries that you're going to find for entry-level positions in Lawrence, Kansas, is probably going to look different than if you're in San Francisco, New York, Seattle, some of the larger, more expensive urban areas. Market demand, again, what's the demand? Is there a lot of people out there like you with similar degrees and backgrounds that are chasing these jobs? The organization, your employment status. I'll tell you that when you are currently employed and you are pursuing other interests, other jobs, you have more leverage in your negotiating when you're currently employed than when you're not. And I know that's a little bit difficult for some of the students that you're working with, because obviously the majority of them aren't going to be employed. But I put this together thinking, kind of leaning towards the new graduate, the first job out of college, but also to those that have been in the working world for a while. Recommendations, do you have a professor or a previous employer that can put together a good recommendation for you? I myself don't think that those have gone on a style. I think that they're still important and have their place, particularly depending on the nature of the position that you're interested in. I would encourage people to research typical salaries in your field or region. If you can talk to people, maybe you have classmates that are working for an organization, and they would be willing to talk about that with you. And a caution on that, I would not ask somebody, what is if I'm trying to go to work for Honeywell Corporation and I know someone that went to work there in a similar position, I wouldn't say, what are they paying you? Do you mind me asking? What I would do is I would say, I've been interviewing and I've been talking with so-and-so at Honeywell, and I really like the organization. I'm really interested, and I see that it's a similar job as to what you're in. And, I'm trying to find something in the $50,000 to $65,000 range. do you think that that would fall in line with what they're paying? I would approach it that way, other than just asking somebody right out, what are you being paid? And conversely, um, you never in a salary negotiation want to ever make a reference to what someone else is making, even if you know what that is, and even if it's not fair. I really feel very strongly about that, that it's never appropriate to bring that out. That's just not something that you do. Okay. So enough of that. What's negotiable? Obviously, salary, money. I see a lot of use of signing bonuses for new hires, and I've been a part of doing that even with new graduates. And that particularly when maybe you can't offer relocation, and the person's right out of college, they've got a, maybe they can load up in a rental U-Haul most of their possessions, and move out of state to the new job. If you're able to maybe ask for two, three, $4,000 as a signing bonus, and explain that would help cover your moving expenses. There's nothing wrong with asking for that. And what I have found is that, because with a lot of companies, the job that they're trying to fill falls into a specific salary range. And that salary range, as most of you know, it's going to have a minimum, a maximum, and a mid-range. The mid-range is arithmetically right in the middle of the maximum and minimum. And typically, if you're a new hire right out of school, they're looking at bringing you in at the minimum or a little bit over the minimum. They're not going to bring you in at the mid-range of the position. That would be, not that it doesn't happen, but it's unlikely that they do. So their hands are going to be a little bit tied in terms of sometimes how much movement they can make and offering you more money. Whereas a signing bonus, that it's easier to get approval to pay somebody a signing bonus than it would to pay someone outside of the amount that they're paying other like applicants, if that makes sense. Vacation, I'll kind of caution you on that too. For a new hire, it's going to be real difficult to negotiate additional vacation time. But if you are an experienced employee and you've been at an employer, and let's say you've accumulated 3 weeks of vacation in the 5 years that you've been with the organization, it's not unusual to be able, and it would very acceptable to try to get that new employer to match the vacation that you had at your previous employer. Tuition reimbursement. The company generally is either going to have a program or they're not going to have a program. And the amount of the reimbursement is pretty well set in stone and is not going to vary. But sometimes you can negotiate when you could begin to start the tuition reimbursement program. So as an example, in a lot of organizations, you're required to be there a year before you can participate in tuition reimbursement. And you could ask, as part of our, part of the discussion, part of the negotiation process, you could ask if you could be considered to be eligible after 3 months or 6 months, sometime sooner. I've seen that. I've seen people be successful in negotiating that. Work location, again, depending on the job, depending on the organization, especially now with so many people working remotely. I'm going to see that to be, I'm going to see that increasing. I'm going to see more and more people working remotely. And I see that as something that will become a negotiable item for a lot of people. And just like the work schedule, the work week, again, you kind of have to do your homework and know what the culture is and know what other people are allowed to do in that organization. You know, you don't want to be offered a job and then right off the bat say, well, yeah, that sounds great, but you know, can I just have Fridays off? Well, that could be a deal breaker if nobody has Fridays off, you know. But if people do have a 4-day work week and you know that from your research, then that would be appropriate to discuss with the hiring manager. Early review evaluation. I have seen where um, you're not quite happy with where you landed on the salary. You're close. You're in the ballpark. You like the benefits. You like the people you're going to work for. You like the location, the culture. Everything's adding up, but you just wish you could have done a little bit better on the salary. There's nothing wrong to say, would you agree to a review in 6 months to look at how I've done and evaluate my progress and be open to consideration of a salaried adjustment. That certainly is fair game in the negotiation process. And then training, professional development, depending on the position, depending on the organization. Sometimes in some professions, there are certification programs or professional organizations that you'd like to belong to. Oftentimes, the organization may be willing to pay for your membership to a certain group. So that often not that can sometimes be an item of negotiation as well. So as far as some successful negotiating techniques, you definitely gotta know what you're worth. And what I would suggest is you not necessarily focus so much on an exact amount, but a desired range. I really want to land somewhere between 50 and $60,000 is what I really want to hope to get to, versus I want $50,000. I think it's better to talk in terms of a range. I think that you should be firm in your discussion, be confident, but also remember, if you're going to negotiate, it's a two-way street. You're going to have to the person, I'm talking to you all like you're getting ready to negotiate your own selves, but the people that you're working with, your students, so forth, you have to understand that in negotiation, if you want something, you may have to give something in order to get that. So it's a two-way street. So you need to be flexible. I would practice your pitch. I'd practice on a colleague, practice on a friend, a parent, somebody that you trust, so that you can actually say the words and be comfortable with the cadence, and do it with a certain amount of confidence. And I talk about be confident in your delivery and gracious in your attitude. You do this with a smile. It's not something that you want to right off the bat feel like you're going to blows with somebody that's soon to be your boss. That's not a good way to get things started. But if you do it properly, if you've done your homework and you're confident and you're gracious in your demeanor, you're only going to look good in the eyes of the person that you're going to do that with. Some others would be avoid accepting first offers. And what I would say to that is, as a general rule, even if you're offered exactly what it is that you were hoping for, or maybe even more than what you were hoping for, it's just a, the proper professional courtesy to say, thank you so much for your offer. I'd like to give it serious consideration. I'm very interested in the organization and in this position. Could we get back together tomorrow at 10 a.m. or sometime 24 or 48 hours later? I just think that what that does, it says that you're serious. You take the job offer seriously, and I think it just sets an appropriate first impression with the person that you're soon to be working for, or the representative of the organization that you're soon to be going to work for. And obviously understand your leverage. Are you again, that comes back to, are you an experienced person? Are you in a field where people are very hard to come by? You just need to have some idea if you have any leverage at all, and don't be afraid to use those. Some key questions to ask is, I would ask the person fairly early in the process what the salary range is for the position. And in most cases, I would think that they would be willing to share that with you. Most organizations generally are fairly transparent with that. And if they're not, I'd kind of think about, I would want to think a little bit about that. I would think in terms of, what's that say about, the organization, if they're not willing to share that. Not that there's not exceptions to it, but as a general rule, that's my own personal feeling. And so with that, then I would want to know what the minimum and the maximum is of that range. Even as a right out of college, I'd want to know what it is that I'm working with. It's also permissible to ask if the salary offer is negotiable. No, you don't want to do that in your pre-screen telephone interview. Okay, you want to wait till it's to the point where they're actually making you an offer. You can say, this is great. This is great news that you've gotten in touch with me, and I'm so excited. Is the salary offer negotiable? And they may say no. And you know what? If they say no, it's probably not. And if they say, well, I don't know, or maybe, or I'll have to get with HR, that means you got a foot in the door. Okay. That means that it probably is. And you should also always, you should know what the benefits are that are included in the offer. Sometimes the benefits, when you put a monetary value to them, they can very easily come close to half of what the actual salary is. So you want to consider that. What should I expect? It's nothing wrong with asking the question, what should I expect in the way of future increases and promotional opportunities? You should know if the organization does salary reviews once a year, or once every 2 years, or every 6 months. There's nothing wrong with asking what is a typical increase for your employees. And also, as far as promotional opportunities, depending on your field and your position, that may be something that that's important to you to know in that process as well is this a job that I'm going to maybe be in for the next 10 years? Or is this something where, I may have the opportunity to grow and develop and have increased responsibility, more salary as time goes on? So I think those are fair questions to ask. And you should always ask to have the offer in writing.
I think we're at the end of the presentation, so I'll hit
Okay.
escape. Thank you, Mark. This was wonderful. So I have a question from Kim, who's listening remotely, and I'm going to go ahead and ask that, and then I'll open it up to the group and for their questions. Kim, a couple slides back, you mentioned something about recommendations and how you take
Yep.
them very seriously and give them some credence.
Yeah.
And she's asking a great question about how does it work? Do you ask a current employer for one? And when do you bring it up? So that could be a sticky situation. And what's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I, boy, I would be very cautious in asking my current employer for a letter of recommendation if I'm currently gainfully employed and I feel like the likelihood is fairly high of that continuing. I probably wouldn't ask my current employer for a recommendation until after I left. Now, an exception to that would be I have had people who I've worked for that I felt comfortable enough with, maybe one, maximum two in my career, to where I said, you know what, I want to level with you to let you know that I am looking. And here's the reason that I'm looking. And if, there were things that they couldn't necessarily help me with or address. And I said, could I use you as a reference? And they were both agreeable to do that. But I would be cautious in asking your current employer for a reference after it's been known. Well, you wouldn't be asking a current employer, once you've left, and you left because you accepted another job. So that's how I'd answer that question.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so others, please feel free to jump in and ask a question of Mark and about salary negotiation, any of the topics that he's mentioned. Some really great advice here.
I'll start us off. I have a question, Mark. So I've often heard that your education and your level of education can determine a salary. Do you feel that with higher education, you can come in asking for a higher salary? Say if you come in with a master's or a PhD, how do you dictate that?
I would say that in some instances, like let's say as an example, engineering, a person that has a master's degree in engineering would be able to would have more leverage in that salary negotiating process than someone who didn't. If you're applying for a product manager job, which is kind of a generic type job that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, a job where a master's degree isn't necessarily required or needed, that extra education probably isn't going to be that much help to you. Not that it would hurt you, but I don't know that it would give you that much more leverage in the salary negotiation process. I'll tell you that in my world, in my experience in human resource leadership positions, having a master's degree was certainly helpful, and I'm sure it helped me obtain better salary offers than I would have received had I not had it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yep.
how can we go about getting a feel for whether our field or the employer that we're looking at does do salary negotiation as a norm?
I would, if you can find out, if you can network and get a feel for, talk to somebody maybe that's in the organization and talk to. I think on Glassdoor, when you follow and read comments, oftentimes people will talk about their experience. They'll talk about what the interviewing process was like. Sometimes they'll share questions that they were asked. And I've seen where people talked about them being able to negotiate a salary with the organization. So, so I would do some background work on that. And then also, as I stated, it's okay if you're made an offer to ask, is this offer negotiable? And it either is or it's not.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You gave some ideas earlier about how to kind of gauge your worth. Is there like a certain site or something that you would maybe suggest that we can go in and find? I just don't really know how I can kind of, like, leaving with my master's, I don't really know how I can even begin knowing my full worth.
Yeah. I looked at a couple to prepare. In fact, I thought maybe I had included it on one of my slides, but obviously I didn't. There is, if you go the Glassdoor, www.glassdoor.com, salaries /salaries/index.htm is a resource. And then www.payscale.com/salary calculator. I tried both of those the other day just for fun, and I thought it was pretty decent. I thought it was definitely in the ballpark.
Okay, I'll check
Yeah.
that out. Thank you.
Sure.
If I could jump in here, there's also, and I'm looking, frantically looking for it, on our website is a link to a NACE, National Association of Colleges and Employers, just another link that is a salary calculator. Let me share my screen one more time here. If I can get that to show. So this is the University Career Center's salary negotiation page. It's from students, go down to job search prep, and then it's in the salary negotiation. So here, there's the pay scale that Mark mentioned. We don't have Glassdoor, but that's a great suggestion, Mark. Here's the NACE salary calculator.
Okay.
And this is, I don't know if they give the way they pull information from revenue sources. And so it's one of the challenges to this, it's pretty good. It'll ask you lots of questions on the origin of the origin of your job offer, like if you're applying for a job in California, that kind of thing, so they'd adjust it for that. And they will also do it on how much experience, how much education you have. But you do have to connect it to a specific job title. So that is one of the weak links, in my opinion, of it. So, but that tells you how specific they are, and they are pulling, as I understand, revenue information and doing some intelligent, kind of fact finding there.
Right.
So another resource for you all to use. But the two that he mentioned, Glassdoor, I use that all over the place. I really think it's a good one, especially in terms of a student doing research on a company, getting a sense of the questions they're asking, their experience of the interview. I always tell students, though, and I wanted to get, this is a roundup to a question. I get the sense from reading that you get two kinds of responses. You get the really unhappy people, and and you get the really super happy people. And so, just what's your thoughts on that? And
I would agree. It's kind of like reviews in general. They tend to attract people who had bad experiences or people who had real good experiences. and
Yeah.
those that, yeah, it's okay. Just don't take the
Yeah.
time to mess with it.
Right. Yeah. So I always tell students, like, just look deeply, and
Yeah.
it's user information, um, and balance that with as much as they can in person.
Sure.
The people who are actually working there, who have worked there, I think that's the ultimate.
Yeah.
Um,
And I really think LinkedIn is a great resource to be able to identify people who you may know that works in an organization, or somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, sort of a thing. I think it's a great tool. I would have liked to have had that years ago.
yeah. Yes. Agreed. Other questions?
You answered my question right on the dot, but I wanted to kind of reiterate just to make sure I understood you correctly. But my big question was about the relocation compensation, just because
Yeah.
I'm looking for a career that's across the country. And so it
Right.
terrifies me that I would have to pay to get all my stuff over there. So
Sure.
is it really just a change of wording? Instead of calling it relocation, you get the signing bonus instead? Is it really that easy, or?
Oh, when I was talking about, instead of relocation, asking for a signing bonus in lieu of, as far as the verbiage, I would ask for a signing bonus.
Okay.
And I would say, and with that, that would help me be in a better position to be able to take on the expenses of moving to your to your location.
Amazing. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. That's so
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah.
That's great language. Yeah. Anyone else have a question?
Linda, I have a question. Hi, Mark. Can you hear me?
Hi, Kim. Yes.
Hi. Great presentation. Really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Question I had is, when you are coming right out of school and you're a new employee or new contributor to the workforce, do you usually do these salary negotiations with a human resources professional, or are you finding that the person that your supervisor does that? And how does that go about usually in the corporate world?
Great question. What I would tell you is that generally, you're getting a salary offer more times than not from a recruiter or someone in the HR department, staffing, whatever the title might be. And that person generally doesn't have that much authority, particularly as it relates to salary. So that if you start the salary negotiation process with that person and you say, I'm really excited about coming to work, I want to work with the team and blah, blah, blah. But I really was thinking that I would be getting X amount of dollars. That person that you're talking with is going to have to go to the hiring manager to get approval one way or the other. So they're kind of a intermediary, a mediator, a communicator, but it's not their decision to make per se. Great question.
Yeah, good question.
Thanks, Mark.
Yep.
I had one last question really quick. If so I've run into, this is just something that I've been doing some research on myself. And by looking at some jobs now, there's jobs, say on LinkedIn or company websites, where you have to do all of the application process online. And there comes a part where you have to put in a desired salary, but it doesn't state on their page what their salary parameters are. How do you approach that?
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Because I don't want to, lowball
No,
them. Thinking,
I know.
Put yourself at a
Yeah, I
disadvantage,
know.
and especially for college students who really don't have an awareness of,
Mm-hmm.
they just don't have
Right.
the knowledge yet. I
Sure.
just really.
Doesn't let you put in zeros.
I think they probably would. Yeah, you probably could do that.
I just hate for, I thought maybe the whole question might come up about, the landscape is definitely changing as it relates to what you can lawfully ask someone as it relates to their pay. In some, I think it's like 17 states, Kansas isn't one of them. It is against the law to ask someone what they're currently paid. And even though it's not against the law in Kansas, what I see is most larger companies have kind of quit asking that question, and they've revised their applications to where they don't ask it. But that doesn't mean that everybody is doing that. So in your case, you're seeing where they are. I would just try to figure out a way to put in zero, put in $1, a way to where you're not locked into an amount, and it's something that can be discussed with a human.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I had a question from Aaron, if we have time. Aaron wanted to know, how do we provide insight to students about negotiating a salary during something like a recession, or what we're facing now, a pandemic?
Boy.
That one's kind of tricky.
Yeah. Early at the very beginning of my presentation, the question is it, what was the question? Is it good, or?
If not, then who?
Yeah, well,
Not now, then when?
and I made references to the fact that there are some times when it's probably not appropriate to try to negotiate salary. And those certainly would be when, you've just experienced a major downsizing in the organization, people are being furloughed, you're being asked to take on more work, more responsibility as a result of it. The organization is struggling. My counsel would be, rather than think about negotiating a better salary for yourself, look at this as an opportunity for you to add value to the organization, to learn new skills, show who you're working for, what you're made of, and look at it as an opportunity that will hopefully down the line pay off in additional compensation. That would be my advice.
Makes sense. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Very good. What I like, Mark, at the end, you were talking about being gracious, and I've seen that with students. It's really important to make, just conveying an eagerness and excitement for joining the team.
Yeah.
While graciously negotiating the salary. I couldn't agree more. I've seen it kind of go the opposite direction. I'm sure you've experienced it, where students come in like, negotiators should come in like it's high stakes poker or something
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
And it really kind of damages the relationship.
Sure.
Later on. And what I've advised students to do is think about, working at your relationship with this person after the negotiations close. You can still negotiate skillfully, but showing a little bit of graciousness, and because you're gonna be working with these people. And,
Right.
Yeah.